إنا فتحنا لك فتحا مبينا ليغفر لك الله ما تقدم من ذنبك ما تقدم من ذنبك وما تأخر. Salam, what's going on? ويتم نعمته عليك ويهديك صراطا مستقيما. Salam, Hannah, what's going on? Good to see you. وينصرك الله نصرا عزيزا. هو الذي أنزل السكينة في قلوب المؤمنين. Alhamdulillah, I'm good. ليزدادوا إيمانا مع إيمانهم ولله جنود السماوات والأرض وكان الله عليما حكيما. وعليكم السلام. قد جاءكم من الله نور وكتاب مبين. Good to see you. بارك الله فيك أيضا. وعليكم السلام. ليدخل المؤمنين والمؤمنات جنات تجري من تحتها الأنهار خالدين فيها ويكفر عنهم سيئاتهم. الآية 5. وكان ذلك عند الله فوزا عظيما. ويعذب المنافقين والمنافقات والمشركين والمشركات. وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته. والمشركين والمشركات الظانين بالله ظن السوء عليهم دائرة السوء. Alhamdulillah, inshallah. عليهم دائرة السوء وغضب الله عليهم ولعنهم وأعد لهم جهنم وساءت مصيرا. Salam. What's going on, Nadia? And the Muslim witch, our favorite jinn, what's happening? Wa alaikum salam. ولله جنود السماوات والأرض وكان الله عزيزا حكيما. Alhamdulillah, I'm good. وعليكم السلام. إنا أرسلناك شاهدا ومبشرا ونذيرا لتؤمنوا بالله ورسوله وتعزروه وتوقروه وتسبحوه بكرة وأصيلا. إن الذين يبايعونك إنما يبايعون الله يد الله فوق أيديهم فمن نكث فإنما ينكث على نفسه. ومن أوفى بما عاهد عليه الله فسيؤتيه أجرا عظيما. سيقول لك المخلفون من الأعراب شغلتنا. Absolutely, I agree for sure. شغلتنا أموالنا وأهلنا فاستغفر لنا. يقولون بألسنتهم ما ليس في قلوبهم قل فمن يملك لكم من الله شيئا إن أراد بكم ضرا أو أراد بكم نفعا بل كان الله بما تعملون خبيرا. Yeah, inshallah, for those who missed the class yesterday, I will post it. I'm planning on posting. I meant to do it today, but I've been busy. So I will download it, inshallah, and post it to YouTube. But hey, what's going on? For now, let's go on, get to our class for the day, inshallah. So what I want to start talking about today, this is going to be something that we're going to take a few days to study, because this is a very complex subject. Yeah, inshallah, I'm going to post it. I'll post today's too. I meant to do it earlier, but I just was real busy today, so I didn't really have a chance. That's why the live is even like an hour later than usual, but I didn't want to miss it. But I had like another class I had to do, and yeah, I just had a lot going on. But you know, like I always say, one of my favorite like little Arabic sayings, "Ma la yudraku kullu, la yudraku jullu." That something that you can't do all of it, you don't leave doing the bulk of it. So even if we can't, go at our regular time or go for the same amount of time that we always do, we still want to at least, there's always benefit. Even if we get together for a few minutes and study one or two verses of the Qur'an, there's always benefit in that. Alhamdulillah, I'm glad you got the newsletter. Yeah, the newsletter is coming out good. I actually think, in my opinion, I think today's newsletter that came out today was probably one of the best issues, I believe. And it's, inshallah, it's going to get even better as we go. I want to add more sections to it, because right now we've been taking like one topic and dissecting it in detail. But I want to add more. Yeah, I want to add more sections. So if you're not already involved with the newsletter, the link is in the bio, and you might want to sign up. Yeah, weekly newsletter comes out every Friday. Right now we're going over Salat in the Qur'an. We're dissecting Salat in the Qur'an. So that's going to be like an ongoing thing for a little while, because there's a lot to it. We've done 5 issues so far. Today was the 5th issue that came out. And inshallah, I plan on like adding maybe like, so keeping like one topic ongoing like we've been doing, and then maybe like adding some other sections of like maybe going over some short surahs, or adding some other stuff in there. So the more we do it, inshallah. Right now, in the beginning, the first 5 issues, I just wanted to like get into like a nice little workflow and like maintain consistency of getting it out every week. But now that it's been consistent now for 5 issues, inshallah, I want to add more things to it. But anyway, let's go and get to our class, because I won't be able to stay on. I'll only be able to stay on for an hour today. So let's go and get to our class. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna start unpacking very controversial verse. And what made me really want to start looking at this verse deeper is actually one of my friends that I have one-on-one classes with wanted me to study it with him and go over it, and like so he can actually go over it with other people that were asking him about it. And this is a verse that personally I've studied a few different times over the time that I've been Muslim, from different angles. But I always find that when you go back to it, when you go back to any verse in the Quran, you're always going to get more out of it than even if you studied it 10 times. You're always going to find new things in it. So I kind of wanted to go back, study it with him, and I wanted to share it with you guys, because this is a very controversial set of verses here. And this is chapter 4, verse 34. The verse that a lot of people think means that you could beat your wife. So we want to study this verse, and I think that in studying this verse, subhanAllah, like in just a little bit that I've studied so far, it just opened my mind up to so many different possibilities that the Quran contains about other concepts. And that's the beautiful thing about studying any verse in the Quran. Like you can literally pick any verse in the Quran, any word in the Quran, and just start studying it, and it's going to take you all over the Quran. You're going to go all over the Quran, and you're going to learn about so many other concepts. You because everything is interrelated. So you're going to learn about so many concepts that wasn't even like primarily the concept that you first started studying. You're going to learn about all kind of things, right? So that's what we're going to do in this discussion. We might take 2 or 3 days and go over this verse, go over different portions of this verse. So this verse is I think, well known to a lot of people that have been, either Muslim for a while or been in any kind of like Muslim spaces. Wa alaikum salam, because this is a verse that's always like either asked about or used as, people use it as a way to like attack the Qur'an or attack Islam. But if you really like dig into this verse, I think you'll see that it holds like treasures, the concepts hold treasures that you wouldn't even believe. And that's what I'm finding, right? And I think that's why like we should never shy away from studying the verses that people think are hard verses, right? Or difficult or controversial verses. We shouldn't shy away from studying them, because once we get past all of the garbage and we get to the beauty of and the poetry of the words that Allah is saying, you'll find that those verses will open up worlds of meaning that you might not have thought about before you went into it. So when I first started studying this verse, I had no idea that was going to open my mind up to what is a rajul, actually. The word that is translated as a man, rajul. I already started like a while ago, like kind of restudying that concept in the Qur'an and like what that actually means. But this verse really opened my mind to just a complete way of thinking about it, that it doesn't have anything to do necessarily with biological gender, right? And what brings us to that conclusion, or what brings us to that, like that direction of study, is when you look at this verse and people ask about this verse, right? They usually focus on just the part in the middle where it says, وَاللَّاتِي تَخَافُونَ نُشُوزَهُنْ, and those that you fear their nushuz. What is nushuz is something that we're going to talk about as we go through the verse, but some negative quality that you fear from them. فَعِذُوهُنَّ, this is how they usually translate it. So I'm not saying like this is the meaning, but I'm just starting us off just seeing why we need to study this. Because most of the time people just go to this part of the verse and they say, those that you fear their nushuz, some negative behavior, which we'll talk more about, like exactly what does that mean. فَعِذُوهُنَّ, right? فَعِذُوهُنَّ, then exhort them. وَهْجُرُهُنَّ فِي الْمَضَاجِعِ, they say it means abandon them in their beds. وَضْرِبُوهُنَّ, and that's the controversial phrase that some people translate as beat them. Some say beat them and they put lightly in parentheses. And it's just a ridiculous, if you really think about it, it's a really ridiculous interpretation, because if you look at the word daraba in the Quran, it doesn't support that at all. Like it's always about daraba Allahu mathalan. Allah puts forward daraba. The word daraba is used to mean he puts forward an example. It's used for when Musa daraba fadrib bi'asaka al-hajar, right? To hit, they translate as hit the rock with your staff. But even the translation of hit, daraba, is assuming, like the meaning of it is assuming it means like hit, right? Because if you think about, like for example, a credit card, right? When you swipe a credit card, there's a code, and the code unlocks something. So in the same way, why does daraba have to mean like literally like hit? Because it isn't the action of hitting that is what made the sea split or the water gush forth from the rock with Musa. It's not that he hit it, right? It's not that he sat there and was like, and he made it gush forth. It's Allah that made it gush forth. So all he has to do is maybe just touch it. Who said it means hit, right? And then this word is also used for traveling in the land, right? وَإِذَا ضَرَبْتُمْ فِي الْأَرْضِ, or وَإِذَا ضَرَبْتُمْ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. I'm trying to remember the exact word. It's in this chapter, actually. It's in the same chapter. What's the exact wording of that? إِذَا ضَرَبْتُمْ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ, but I also think there is a verse, إِذَا ضَرَبْتُمْ فِي الْأَرْضِ. So traveling in the path of Allah is called darb. Traveling in the earth is called darb. That's one of the names of it. Okay? And they say it's because your feet hit the ground, but we're going to talk more. So this isn't the explanation of it. I'm just showing like why, to start off with, why this is problematic, right? Why this is problematic, okay? And why we need to think deeper about the meaning of it. So the first place to start is in the beginning of the verse, because that's why I started here. I mentioned this here because I wanted to show like this is where most people start at. They start at this point. وَاللَّاتِي تَخَافُونَ نُشُوزَهُنَّ. But there's more to the verse before it. So you actually want to start in the beginning of the verse. So when you go to the beginning of the verse, he says, الرِّجَالُ قَوَّامُونَ عَلَى النِّسَاءِ. Okay, so the normal translation of it is الرِّجَالُ قَوَّامُونَ عَلَى النِّسَاءِ. The normal translation of it is, they say men, they translate al-rijal as men, are the maintainers and supporters of, they translate nisa as women. Okay, now we wanna question this interpretation. And the reason we want to do that is because the Qur'an, I believe, the Qur'an gives us concepts. It doesn't just give us like fixed categories, right? Where this, this word is just related to this like biological, person, and it doesn't apply to anyone else, or it's related to this like geographic region, and it's not related to anywhere else. The Quran is a universal book. So to the extent possible, right? Wa alaikum salam, we want to always like look for the universal meanings of the words, or the core meanings of the words, right? So what's really interesting here, what I find to be really interesting, is the combination of the word ar-rijal and qawwamun, the combination together, that ar-rijal are qawwamun. Okay? Why? Why is that an interesting combination? Because if you look at another place in the Quran, we find another word. So if we go to chapter 49, verse 11. So if we go to chapter 49, verse 11, he says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, O you have believed, La yaskhar qawmun min qawm. Let not, so how they normally translate this, they say, let not a group of people mock another group of people. But the word in Arabic for a group of people is qawm. Qawm. Okay? Now, why we're putting these together, and why that's interesting, is the word qawm has the same root word as the beginning of 434 when he says qawwamun. Qawwamun, the word that's being translated as supporters and maintainers, is the word qawwamun. Both of these words, qawm and qawwamun, both come from a root word meaning to stand or standing. They come from qama or qiyam, okay, to stand, or the act of standing, okay? The same root word that we get like aqimus salah, establish the salah, meaning make it stand. So both of these words come from the same root, okay? And what's interesting about that, before I read the rest of this verse, I'm going to read the rest of this verse in a second. But what's interesting about that is, where does the word rijal come from? Okay, if you go to another chapter, chapter 7, if you go to chapter 7, verse, it's towards the end, chapter 7, verse 195. So if you go to chapter 7, verse 195, he says, Alahum arjulun yamshuna biha. Right? Do they have legs by which they walk? Okay? He's refuting people that are called on besides Allah, or things that are called on besides Allah, from the previous verse. If you look at the previous verse, he says, Inna ladina tad'una min dunillah, those that you call upon besides Allah. And then in the next verse he says, Alahum arjulun yamshuna biha. Do they have legs by which they walk? The word for legs is arjul. Arjul. What's the singular for leg is rijl. Rijl. So the word rijal, or the word rajul, linguistically is related to the word for leg. Isn't that, subhanAllah, isn't that interesting? Walaikum salam. Just first of all, just as an observation, look at the connection between the words, right? Ar-rijalu qawwamun, right? The ar-rijal comes from the word or related to a word meaning leg, so something that allows you to stand, and qawwamun is from the root of standing. So I don't think that's random. I think that tells us the deeper core concept behind these words, that it's not just, it's not just randomly talking about like this for all times, for all times, for the rest of the world. Yeah, no, they have arjul is because qadam is feet or foot. Yeah, rijl is leg. So a universal book for all times, perhaps, and especially when we apply the the method that Allah gave us in the book itself, where He says, "Alladina yastami'una al-qawla fayattabi'una ahsanahu." Those who listen to the word and they follow what is most beautiful of it. What is most beautiful, ahsanahu. So if we're trying to follow what's most beautiful of it, in my opinion, Allah knows best, we should look at the concept as a core concept that connects to a lot of different things. And it's a universal concept and not just limited to a biological gender. Even if maybe in the time that it was revealed, see, subhanAllah, that's the beauty of the language of the Qur'an, of digging into the language, is that, yeah, when the Qur'an was revealed, did people who heard it understand it to mean like a biological, like male? Then maybe they did. But that doesn't mean, right? That's what I mean about the layers. That doesn't mean that it has to have that same application for all times, right? Because maybe at the time that it was revealed, those were the people who would have been considered in that society to fit that description. But it's a description more so than a biological gender. It's a description. And we'll see that the more we study this word qawm. The word qawm is what really lets you know that it's a description. And I'm going to show you that in a second. But I just want to show you the connections first of how rijal, rijl, rajul, right, is connected to the legs. And in this verse, ar-rijalu qawwamun, it's ar-rijalu qawwamun is connected to the idea of standing. Okay, so that's one thing. That's one connection. Another verse, we're going to go back to the verse about qawm, but I want to show you like how this word rijal is used interchangeably with the idea of walking on feet, right? Because when you go to chapter 2, verse 238 and 239, so chapter 2, verse 238 and 239, he says, حافظوا على الصلوات, guard the salawat, والصلاة الوسطى, and the middle salah, وقوموا لله قانتين, and stand for Allah, right? Stand for Allah in obedience. Stand, qumu. Then he said, فَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ, but if you fear, فَرِجَالًا أَوْ رُكْبَانًا, but if you fear then, rijalan, walking on feet, أَوْ رُكْبَانًا, or riding. فَإِذَا أَمَنْتُمْ, then when you feel secure, فَاذْكُرُوا اللَّهَ كَمَا عَلَّمَكُمْ مَا لَمْ تَكُونُوا تَعْلَمُونَ, then remember Allah as He taught you in the way that you did not know. Okay? So in this verse, they don't translate فَرِجَالًا as فَرِجَالًا أَوْ رُكْبَانًا as like men and riding. They translate فَرِجَالًا أَوْ رُكْبَانًا as walking on feet and or riding. رِجَالًا. So rijal could mean in the Qur'an, they translate it sometimes as men, sometimes as walking on feet. Why? Because the core concept is the leg, is the thing that makes you stand, or the things that gives you the ability to walk. That's why he said, Alahum arjulun yamshuna biha. Do they have arjul? Do they have legs by which they walk? Okay. Now, when you go back to 49:11, this is what really will open our mind up, I think, about the meaning of these words. Walaikum salam. That it doesn't just mean, like like a biological gender. So here, look at these words, subhanAllah. Look at how these words are used here. He says, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu la yaskhar qawmun min qawm. He says, oh, you have believed, let not one, I'm going to give you like how they translate it, and then I'm going to give you my explanation. So he said, they usually say, La yaskhar qawmun min qawm means, let not a group of people mock another group of people. But what's interesting is the rest of the verse, because he says, Asa an yakunu khayran minhum. It could be that they are better than them. Wala nisa'un min nisa'in, nor nisa from nisa. Like, so how they would normally translate is women, right? Nor women mock other women. Asa an yakunna khayran minhunna. It might be that they are better than them. So the word qawm in this verse is contrasted with the word nisa. That's often translated as women. And so most times when people read this verse, they think that, okay, well, that's because qawm primarily refers to men. That's what they think, like different scholars and stuff like that. But if you think about this a little bit differently, they were onto something, but they were just a little bit off of something too. They were onto something, but they were just a little bit off of something, in my opinion. Because I think they missed the deeper idea here, in my humble opinion, that yes, qawm does relate to rijal, okay? Because he said, ar-rijalu qawwamun, right? Ar-rijal are qawwamun. They have something to do with standing or making things stand. We'll talk more about this specific word in a second, but or maybe even if we don't get to it today, but I plan on, we're going to go over this inshallah for a few days. This is an important topic and I want to really like cover it in detail. But right now, today, we just want to look at the combination of qawm and the rijal and what that tells us, okay? So yes, qawm and rijal are connected, right? And you see that ar-rijalu qawwamun. So here, qawm is the opposite of nisa, right? So qawm contains the concept of rijal. That's why this word qawm could be used as a replacement for the word rijal. Because when you combine the terms ar-rijalu qawwamun, ar-rijal have the quality of qawwamun, of qawama, of doing something with standing or making something stand. So ar-rijal as a group can be called qawm, okay? And then the opposite of that is nisa. So now, when you look at this word, so that opens some things up. Because when you look at this word qawm in the Qur'an, you don't find, even though the word qawm is usually translated as people, that's how they usually translate it, right? They say, certain messengers that were sent ila qawmihi, to his people, right? But it doesn't mean they were just sent to the men, correct? Messengers were sent to everyone, right? But if you really look at a lot of places that this word qawm is used, it's not a description of gender, and it's not a description of geographical location. It's a description of people who fulfill certain qualities. Okay? Qawm always negative when this I don't know. We'll come to that, inshallah. I think as we go, some of those questions might be answered because we want to also study separately the word nisa. But for right now, today, I just want to show the connection between qawm and rijal and how the word qawm doesn't indicate biological gender or like geographical location, even though it's translated as people. So when you look at some of the verses, look at some of these verses. So you look at chapter 7, for example. Go to chapter 7 and look at verses 175 and 176. So chapter 7, verse 175 and 176. He says, وَاتْلُ عَلَيْهِمْ نَبَأَ الَّذِي آتَيْنَاهُ آيَاتِنَا فَانْسَلَخَ مِنْهَا فَأَتْبَعَهُ الشَّيْطَانُ فَكَانَ مِنَ الْغَاوِينَ. and recite upon them the news of the one who we gave our ayats, and he stripped himself from them. So Shaitan followed him up, and he became of the astray. And then وَلَوْ شِئْنَا لَرَفَعْنَاهُ بِهَا, if we had willed, we would have elevated him by them. And then he gives an example of this type of person. And then at the end of the verse, he says, ذَلِكَ مَثَلُ الْقَوْمِ الَّذِينَ كَذَّبُوا بِآيَاتِنَا. That is the example of the qawm, the people, the qawm, who denied our ayats. That is the example of the qawm, the people who denied our ayats. So you see here, the word qawm isn't a biological description. It isn't a geographical description. It's a description. It's a moral description. It's a description of people. It's not a tribal description. It's a description of character and morals, of people who have qiyam, because the word qawm, qawwam, is the same root from standing, from qiyam, to make something stand, or the act of standing, to the support of something, right? The activity of something. Okay? So here, what's the action? It's the one who stripped himself or herself from the ayat that Allah gave, the signs, the lessons that Allah gave, right? So this person who denied the ayat is called al-qawm. Al-qawm alladhina kadhabu bi ayatina. So see, the word qawm, it doesn't just have to do with like a gender or a geographical location. So when he contrasted qawm in 49:11 with nisa, la yaskhar qawmun min qawm wa la nisa'un min nisa, right? So qawm is the opposite of nisa, but it doesn't mean that qawm is a biological gender, because when you look at the word qawm in other places, it doesn't refer to biological gender. It refers to qualities. It refers to moral qualities. Like here, the qawm that denied the ayats, right? The people who, the qawm, someone who's described as qawm are people who have qiyam of something. They're making something stand. They're making an action come into existence. Yes, it's like an active action, right? They're making something come into existence. Like let's look at another usage that I think explains this more. Let me look at the verse real quick, where the verse is at. Let's see. In 30:25. In 30:25. Maybe you could say that a grouping around a concept. Yeah, that's a good way of thinking about it. Okay, so like we're gonna go to 30:25 next. So, okay, think about these connections that we discussed so far. This is a completely like new way of thinking about it. So you really do have to like take time to like process all the different connections. So number one, here's the connections that we discussed so far. We have ar-rijalu qawwamun. So we see a connection. Yeah, inshallah. The one that's specifically about ayat, I don't think I put that one. I think that was a while ago. But see, we have ar-rijalu qawwamun. We have the connection between this term ar-rijal and the idea of standing, qawwamun, or making something stand. Okay? And that makes sense because we go back to the root of the word rijal, which means legs, or walking on legs, or walking on feet. Allahumma arjulun yamshuna biha. So these are connected, right? Even though the standing part seems like it indicates like keeping something in a consistent state, whereas the walking part seems like it has to do with movement. But they're both like actions of the legs, right? So then when you connect that to, so in that verse, ar-rijalu qawwamuna ala nisa, ar-rijal, the word that's translated as men, but we want to forget that translation. Ar-rijal is the opposite of nisa, and their characteristic has to do with standing. And then in 49:11, now they're called qawm, which is from the same root as standing, but now they're the opposite of the word nisa. So it's almost as if the word qawm contains the idea of rijal, but not as men in the biological sense, but in terms of the legs and the movement, the activity. Okay? And to show that the word qawm doesn't mean necessarily biological gender or or geographical location, like just the people of a certain location, or just biological gender, is we look at verses like the one that we just read, where he talks about those who are denying his ayat or our ayat, and he calls them al-qawm alladhina kadhabu bi ayatina, right? The qawm that denied our ayat. Follow me? So why are they called qawm? Because it's a description of their perspective or their personality or their moral traits. Some act of qiyam, because when you do qiyam, you're carrying something out. And that's why we went to chapter 30:25, because here he says, وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ أَن تَقُومَ السَّمَاءُ وَالْأَرْضُ بِأَمْرِهِ. And from his ayat is أَن تَقُومَ السَّمَاءُ وَالْأَرْضُ بِأَمْرِهِ. That the as-sama'u wal-ard, the heavens and the earth, taqumu, stands by his permission, or sorry, by his command. So the continual existence of the heavens and the earth is referred to as taqumu. It's standing. You see what I'm saying? So the word qama has something to do with keeping something in a certain state. Right? You follow me? Because look, if you look at another verse, if you go to chapter 2, verse 20. Chapter 2, verse 20, he says, Yakadul barqu, the lightning almost, yakhtafu absarahum, almost snatched away their vision. Kullama ada'a lahum, every time it illuminated or lit for them or gave them light, mashaw fihi, they walked in it. Wa idha adlama alayhim qamu, and when it became dark upon them, qamu, they stood. So see how standing here is the opposite of walking, right? So walking indicates movement, and standing indicates standing still. So when he says, وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ أَن تَقُومَ السَّمَاءُ وَالْأَرْضُ بِأَمْرِهِ, that the heavens and the earth, from his ayat, is that the heavens and the earth, taqumu, is standing, right, by his command. Yeah, it means he's keeping it in a consistent state where it's not collapsing, it's not all falling into like disorder. Taqumu, its existence is continuing. And that's perhaps why, what does he call himself? So in this same chapter 2, verse 255, what does he call himself? He says, Allahu la ilaha illa huwa al-hayy al-qayyum. Allah, there's no God except for He, al-hayy, the living, al-qayyum, al-qayyum, right? Why is He al-qayyum? Al-qayyum is, again, al-qayyum is from the same root of qama, right? It's from the same root of qama, to stand. So al-qayyum is the one who is making everything stand. In other words, making everything continue in its existence. That's why when you put the verses together, he says, وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ أَن تَقُومَ السَّمَاءُ وَالْأَرْضُ. From his ayat is that the heavens and the earth are standing, بِأَمْرِهِ. And he is al-qayyum, لَا تَأْخُذُهُ سِنَةٌ وَلَا نَوْمٌ. Right? No slumber or sleep overtakes him. Why is that important to say? Because for the standing to be continuous, the one that's causing it to stand has to be continuously present. Right? If you remove the one that's causing it to stand, then it won't stand. You follow what I'm saying? So he is Al-Qayyum la ta'khuduhu sinatun wa la nawm. There can't be a gap in his presence because him being Al-Qayyum is what's making everything stand. So you see how much deeper, subhanAllah, these words are, right? This idea of qama and qawm, and qawwamun, all these different words, right? So that's why we wanted to start here and think about what exactly does this phrase mean? Ar-rijalu qawwamuna ala nisa. We'll talk about nisa in the upcoming class. But this class, we're just focusing on these two words, right? So another connection here that's interesting to think about is in chapter 5. So if you look in chapter 5, verse 21, we'll start at verse 21. Let's see. Yeah, we'll start at verse 20, actually. Okay, let's start at verse 20. Because I think these verses, chapter 5, verses 20 up to 26, I think they give a really good understanding of possibly some of the meanings of the word qawm. And again, why are we looking at the word qawm? Alhamdulillah, thank you, Rahma. Why are we looking at the word qawm? Is because it's the opposite. So again, keep this in mind because this helps us to understand these words. Why are we looking at the word qawm? Why do we care about the word qawm in this study? Because number one, ar-rijalu qawwamun. These two concepts are linked. The idea of rijal, which is always translated as men, I want us to just really forget that translation. And it's linked with qawwamun, which comes from the word qama, meaning to stand. It's a variation of that word. And then another variation of that word, which is the word qawm, which is often translated as people, in Surah Al-Hujurat, is made the opposite of nisa, right? So that's why we care about the word qawm, because if it's the opposite of nisa, does that mean biological men? But then when we look at the word qawm in the Qur'an, we see no, not necessarily, because the word qawm is used as a description of activity. Oh yeah, alhamdulillah, that's understandable. Appreciate you, Husky. Thank you. Okay, so let's look at these verses here, chapter 5, verse 20, because when you first, inshallah, when you first look at these, ثُمَّ اسْتَقَامُوا. Yeah, good verse. Yeah, about standing. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ قَالُوا رَبُّنَا اللَّهُ ثُمَّ اسْتَقَامُوا. Then they seek to stand. Yeah, a lot of verses that show like a different meaning of this word of the words that are related to standing. Okay. So these verses here, chapter 5, verse 20 to 26, are really interesting because they show perhaps why even when it comes to the people that were associated with certain messengers and prophets, why even they were called qawm. Because we might think that they were just called qawm because they were like ethnically related to, this group of people, or geographically, or however they were connected to them. But if you look in the Qur'an, actually the description is more spiritual, right? And more moral, more psychological, like more character-driven descriptions, as opposed to like ethnic or geographical or biological descriptions. So listen to this. Starting at 5:20. وَإِذْ قَالَ مُوسَى لِقَوْمِهِ. When Musa said to his qawm, okay? So automatically we would think, oh, that's like his qawm is like related to him like by nationality or by country or whatever. But look at all the descriptions. The descriptions are all like descriptions of character. وَإِذْ قَالَ مُوسَى لِقَوْمِهِ يَا قَوْمِ اذْكُرُوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكُمْ إِذْ جَعَلَ فِيكُمْ أَنْبِيَاءَ. He said, "O my qawm, remember the blessing of Allah upon you when He made amongst you prophets." So the description was not of, you were from this. Remember the blessing of Allah upon you when, He made you, from these people. qawman Amerikiyin, like American people, or something like that, right? He describes like a moral thing, right? Or a description that's connected to like spiritual things, spirituality. Remember the blessing of Allah upon you. When He made amongst you prophets, وَجَعَلَكُمْ مُلُوكًا, and He made you kings. So see, there's qiyam in these things. There's making things stand, making society stand, right? Teaching people, the revelation, helping them to stand. وَآتَاكُمْ مَا لَمْ يُؤْتِ أَحَدًا مِنَ الْعَالَمِينَ, right? He said, and He has given you that which He has not given to any of the alamin. Then He said, Ya qawmi, O my qawm, udkhulul al-ard al-muqaddasa, enter the holy land, allati kataba Allahu lakum, which Allah has written for you. وَلَا تَرْتَدُّوا عَلَىٰ أَدْبَارِهِمْ فَتَنْقَلِبُوا خَاسِرِينَ, and don't turn back on your backs. Don't return on your backs. So فَتَنْقَلِبُوا خَاسِرِينَ, so your situation will turn to you being losers. تَنْقَلِبُوا, like you will flip over. انقلاب, تَنْقَلِبُوا خَاسِرِينَ. قَالُوا يَا مُوسَى, they said, O Musa, إِنَّ فِيهَا قَوْمًا جَبَّارِينَ. He said, there are in that place, قَوْمًا جَبَّارِينَ. قَوْم جَبَّارِينَ. Look at the description is character. قَوْمًا جَبَّارِينَ. They are like tyrant people, right? وَإِنَّا لَن نَدْخُلَهَا حَتَّى يَخْرُجُوا مِنْهَا. And we will never enter it until they come out from it. فَإِنْ يَخْرُجُوا مِنْهَا فَإِنَّا دَاخِلُونَ. So if they come out of it, we will enter. And then look at this next verse. This is amazing, right? Because we said, الرِّجَالُ قَوَّامُونَ. So rijal and qawwamun, or qama, connected, and then la yaskhar qawmun min qawm wa la nisa'un min nisa. So qawm is the opposite of nisa. And then here, look at the next verse. What does he say? Qala rajulani min alladhina yakhafuna an'ama Allahu alayhima. He said two rajulan. They usually translate it as two men. Alhamdulillah. They usually translate it as two men, right? But why would Allah care about telling us there was two men? Right here. Qala rajulani. Two men. Why would Allah care about that? Right? Look at the description of what kind of rajulani they were. It's a moral description. Right? Min alladhina yakhafun, of those who were fearing. An'ama Allahu alayhima, Allah had blessed them. So why is it that we find ar-rijal qawwamun, we find the rijal and the idea of qama, standing, to be connected? And here we find Musa addressing his people, ya qawmi, and when they refuse to carry out the qiyam of this activity, Musa is trying to get them to do qiyam of the activity of entering the city, or the land, sorry. And when they refuse, rajulani, two rajuls are the ones that spoke. Two of those who are in this movement, right? They're moving towards the goal, right? They're moving towards the goal. Alahum arjulun yamshuna biha. Do they have legs by which they walk? Qala rajulani min alladhina yakhafun, of those who are fearing. An'ama Allahu alayhima, whom Allah has blessed them, said, Udkhulu alayhimul bab, enter the gate upon them. فَإِذَا دَخَلْتُمُوهُ, so when you have entered it, فَإِنَّكُمْ غَالِبُونَ, then you will be victorious. وَعَلَى اللَّهِ فَتَوَكَّلُوا إِن كُنتُم مُؤْمِنِينَ, and upon Allah place your trust if you are believers. Now the next verse is really amazing. He says, قَالُوا, how did they respond? Because remember, he kept saying to them, مَا قَوْم, مَا قَوْم, مَا قَوْم, right? Like, how many times? إِذْ قَالَ مُوسَى لِقَوْمِهِ يَا قَوْمِ ادْخُلُوا الْأَرْضَ الْمُقَدَّسَةَ. So at least 2 times so far, he called them his qawm, right? And look what they responded to Musa. قَالُوا يَا Musa. They said, O Musa, إِنَّا لَن نَدْخُلَهَا, we will never enter it, abadan, ever, مَا دَامُوا فِيهَا, as long as they are remaining therein. فَاذْهَبْ أَنْتَ وَرَبُّكَ, so you and your Lord go. فَقَاتِلَ, and fight. إِنَّا هَاهُنَا قَاعِدُونَ, they said, we are here sitting. SubhanAllah, we're sitting. He called them qawm, which is related to standing, and was telling them to do something. And then two rajuls spoke up, two people who got legs and are walking to the goal. And they said, what are we doing? We're sitting. So it's like the sitting became the opposite of qawm, because they were supposed to be carrying out qiyam. But they were qawm in another way, because then you go to the next verse. قَالَ رَبِّي إِنِّي لَا أَمْلِكُ إِلَّا نَفْسِي وَأَخِي. He said, my Lord, I don't control anyone except for myself and my brother. فَافْرُقَ بَيْنَنَا وَبَيْنَ الْقَوْمِ الْفَاسِقِينَ. He said, so separate between us and between الْقَوْمِ الْفَاسِقِينَ, the qawm that are fasiqeen, the qawm that come outside of the order of Allah. فَفَسَقَ عَنْ, what did Allah say about Iblis? فَفَسَقَ عَنْ أَمْرِ رَبِّهِ. He fasaqa from the order of his Lord. الْقَوْمِ الْفَاسِقِينَ فَسَقُوا عَنْ أَمْرِ رَبِّهِمْ. They came out from the order of their Lord. But see, they're called al-qawm in a moral way. Al-qawm al-fasiqeen. After they didn't do qiyam, they didn't carry out the activity that they were supposed to, but instead they were qawm in another way. They carried out the activity of going outside the order of Allah. But they are contrast with being qawm by being called qa'idun. They're going to sit. Okay? SubhanAllah. So beautiful. So now we have another. So we're putting together like what we want to call like the semantic field. By the way, the reason I keep doing this, so don't think I'm just like, oh, he's just chilling. Well, I like to chill anyway. But the reason I'm doing this is my neck kind of hurts. So this kind of makes it feel better when I sit like this. So sometimes sitting up like this, when I have like a few different classes, when I sit up like this part of my neck starts hurting by the end of the day, and I just want to like lay flat. So like this kind of helps. Okay, but look, we're putting together like the semantic field, right? We're putting together the semantic field of these concepts. Ar-rijalu qawwamun. So we have rijal, arjul. We have this word that's translated as men. Inshallah. Rijal, which is connected to legs. Arjul, or rijalan, walking on foot. And then we connected that to the word qawm, because it's the opposite of nisa. But now we have a new word that we find in the context of qawm and rajulan, which is qa'idun, sitting. Okay? So I want to introduce this concept, and then we'll pick up more on this tomorrow, because I'm gonna end in about 5 minutes. But if we go to chapter 4, verse 95, what's the opposite of sitting? Qawm, perhaps, is one of them. But if we go to 495, look at this. Now, what's interesting about this is 495 is in the same chapter as the verse that we're studying, which is 434. Yeah, semantic fields. Toshiku Isutu, he's amazing. 495 is in the same chapter as Nisa, yeah, which they translate as women. We're going to talk more about that word, inshallah. But right now we're doing it piece by piece. We're just taking it apart piece by piece, because these very like complex and even sometimes controversial verses, you have to really slow down and like just look at them piece by piece and like put them in the context of the Qur'an as a whole. But here's an observation that we'll pick up on inshallah tomorrow. Personally, I've never seen anyone make this observation. They could have. I'm not saying they haven't, but I'm just saying me personally, I haven't seen it. So you may have heard this here first. I don't know. But when you put these concepts together with the previous verse that we just talked about with Musa, and how you have qawm, they're called qawm, but then they said we are going to be sitting. So now that opens up the semantic field of these concepts, al-rijal, qawm, qawwamun, to that they reference the idea of sitting. And this verse 495 is in actually the same chapter as the verse that we're studying, 434. And listen to this verse. Look at the similarities. So actually, if you're following in the Qur'an, like if you're following with us with the Qur'an, put something like what I'm doing is I put my pen on one page and I'm looking at the other page. Put something there so you can go back and forth. And look at how similar these verses are. Like in meaning, right? So he says, لا يستوي القاعدون من المؤمنين. Those who are sitting, al-qa'iduna, those who are sitting of the believers, are not equal, غير أولي الضرر, except those who have some cause, like they're suffering some harm or something like that. They're not equal. Those who are sitting are not equal with وَالْمُجَاهِدُونَ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ بِأَمْوَالِهِمْ وَأَنفُسِهِمْ. And those who are striving in the path of Allah, right, with their wealth and their own selves. And you look in the other verse. Well, before we look to the other verse, read this next part. Listen to this next part. فَضَّلَ اللَّهُ الْمُجَاهِدِينَ بِأَمْوَالِهِمْ وَأَنفُسِهِمْ عَلَى الْقَاعِدِينَ دَرَجَةً. That Allah gave Allah gave preference or virtue to al-mujahideen, those who are striving with their wealth and their selves, over those who are sitting, daraja, a level. Okay? Now listen to that wording and look at 434. Listen to the wording of 434. He said about the mujahideen, faddal Allah, right? He gave virtue to those who are mujahideen with their wealth and their self. And listen to 434. Ar-rijalu qawwamuna ala nisa. Ar-rijalu are in this standing position. La yastawi al-qa'iduna min al-mu'minin. Those who are sitting of the believers. See the connection? Standing, sitting. Same chapter. Why are they qawwamun? Why are they in this standing position? Bima faddala Allahu ba'dahum ala ba'd. Because Allah faddala. Same wording. Faddala Allahu mujahidina bi amwalihim wa anfusihim ala al-qa'idin. Allah gave bounty or virtue over the mujahideen, over those who are sitting. And here he said, Ar-rijalu qawwamun, are standing, ala nisa, bima faddala Allahu ba'dahum ala ba'd. وَبِمَا أَنْفَقُوا مِنْ أَمْوَالِهِمْ. And because they spend of their amwal, of their wealth. فَضَّلَ اللَّهُ مُجَاهِدِينَ بِأَمْوَالِهِمْ. Look at the connection between the verses. It's so beautiful, actually. Right? And then he said, فَضَّلَ اللَّهُ مُجَاهِدِينَ بِأَمْوَالِهِمْ وَأَنفُسِهِمْ عَلَى الْقَاعِدِينَ دَرَجَةً, a level. Where else do we have that wording of a level, a daraja? Go to chapter 2. Look at chapter 2, verse, what verse is that? That is, bro, where's the verse? I know I'm right in the area. Oh, okay. Verse 228. So chapter 2, verse 228. Listen to this. He says, just part of the verse, like towards the end, 2:228. He says, وَلِلْرِجَالِ عَلَيْهِنَّ دَرَجَةً. The rijal have over them a daraja. And this is in the section of like divorce and, talking about what Allah created in their wombs. So immediately a person would think, oh, well, that has to be like biological. But remember what I said in the beginning, that even if when the Qur'an was being revealed, the people that it was being revealed to understood it in that particular way. But the Qur'an gives us like core concepts that we can apply to multiple different situations, as long as we stay within the constraints of the meanings of the words, right? So now, subhanAllah, think about that. Allah said that he فضل الله المجاهدين على القاعدين daraja, a daraja. The mujahideen, those who are striving over those who are sitting, a daraja. And here he said, وَلِلرِّجَالِ عَلَيْهِنَّ daraja. They have the rijal have a daraja, a level. And الرِّجَالُ قَوَّمُونَ. They're standing, so they're the opposite of sitting. Follow me? When you put the connections together, it gives the impression that a rajul is not a man in the biological sense, and we shouldn't even translate as man. A rajul is al-mujahid bi-amwalihi or amwaliha wa anfusiha, or bi-maliha wa nafsiha. That al-rajul huwa al-mujahid bi-nafsihi aw nafsiha wa malihi aw maliha. That al-rajul is the one who is carrying out the struggle and the striving with his or her wealth and soul, and is the opposite of the qa'id, the one that is sitting. Okay, so perhaps these words, when we think about it, tell us like deeper meanings of these words that could be applied to anyone that fulfills these qualities, whether biologically male or female. So I'll leave it with that for tonight, inshallah. Hopefully I piqued your interest a little bit. Inshallah, you come back and we'll talk about it some more. Love you guys as always, as I always say. Alhamdulillah. Love you guys as always, man. I know I always say it, but I truly do mean it, man. I really love you guys. I couldn't do these things. Alhamdulillah, I couldn't do these things without you guys. And I appreciate Rahma. Thank you for all of the encouragement. I appreciate everyone, but Rahma was really like very, very enthusiastic with the encouragement, and I appreciate that. Alhamdulillah. Yeah, Nisa in some way, we're gonna talk more about like what does that mean. But Nisa, the concept of Nisa in some way, inshallah, is the opposite of those who are al-mujahidun, like somehow related to al-qa'idun. Not biological gender, but a certain characteristic that could go either way. So perhaps biological males could be in certain situations nisa, right? But we're going to talk more, inshallah, but we wanted to just take it piece by piece. So I promise, inshallah, very soon I will upload the last 2 classes on YouTube. I just didn't get a chance to today. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And with that, I'll see you guys later. Assalamu alaikum.